All right, let's talk about a topic that so many UPSC aspirants feel they know, but often get wrong in the exam hall: Buddhism. It's that classic case of familiarity being a bit of a trap. We're here to change that. So why does this happen? You've read the chapters, you know the names and dates, but then you see the question, and it feels like it's in a different language. Well, that's because UPSC isn't just checking your memory. It's testing something much deeper: your conceptual clarity. They're not just going to ask you what happened, but why it happened. Can you really, truly explain the core disagreement between the Sarvastivada and Mahasanghika schools? Do you get the subtle but crucial difference between a Bodhisattva and a future Buddha? That's the level we're aiming for today. We're going to build that solid foundation of understanding. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the Buddha's own journey. Then we'll get into the heart of his teachings. We'll look at the Sangha, the monastic order he set up. After that, we tackle the big one: the councils and the schisms. This is where the trickiest questions come from. And we'll wrap up with Bodhisattvas and the sacred texts. Ready? Let's get into it. Okay, first things first, we have to start with the story of Siddhartha Gautama himself. Look, this isn't just some background information. His life story is literally the foundation upon which the entire philosophy is built. His journey from a sheltered prince to the enlightened one is everything. Now, these 5 events are absolute gold for your exams. You need to know them cold. His birth at Lumbini, the moment he left his palace at age 29, the Great Renunciation, his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya, that first groundbreaking sermon at Sarnath, and finally, his death, or parinirvana, at Kushinagar. This is prime material for match the following questions, so lock it in. And to make it even easier to remember, each event has a distinct symbol. Birth is the lotus. The Great Renunciation is the horse, symbolizing his departure. Enlightenment, of course, is the Bodhi tree. The first sermon, also called the Dharma Chakra Pravartana, is the 8-spoked wheel, and his death is represented by the stupa. Seriously, knowing this table is one of the highest yield things you can do. So he becomes enlightened. Now what? What did he actually teach the world? Well, the Buddha's whole philosophy wasn't some high-flying abstract theory. It was a practical, down-to-earth guide for how to end suffering. That's it. This focus on a practical solution is the absolute core of his message. And the entire system is built on this elegant framework, the 4 noble truths. Number 1, life involves suffering, or dukkha. It's just a fact. Number 2, there's a reason for the suffering, samudaya, and it's our desires and cravings. Number 3, and this is the hopeful part, this suffering can end. That's nirodha. And finally, number 4, magga. There is a clear path to end it. And that path is the famous Noble Eightfold Path. Now, don't just memorize it as a list of 8 things. Understand its structure. It's grouped into 3 stages. First is prajna, or wisdom. That's about seeing things correctly. Then comes shila, or morality, which is about acting correctly. And finally, samadhi, or concentration, which is about training your mind. This whole system is what's known as the middle path, a balanced approach that avoids the extremes of both luxury and self-torture. Now, a brilliant teaching is one thing, but how do you make it last for centuries? The Buddha was a practical guy. He knew he needed an organization to preserve and spread his teachings, and that organization was the Sangha, the order of monks and nuns. And with the Sangha comes some key vocabulary you've got to know. A bhikshu, or a bhikkhuni, is a fully ordained monk or nun. An upasaka, or upasaka, is a lay follower, someone who follows the teachings but doesn't renounce the world. The patimokkha is their rulebook, their code of conduct. And these last 2 are super important. Pravrajya is the initial ceremony to become a novice, but upasampada is the final full ordination as a monk. Don't mix those 2 up. And believe me, the discipline was no joke. There were hundreds of rules, but these 4 were the absolute deal breakers. They're called the parajika offenses. If a monk committed any one of these, it was an instant, permanent expulsion from the Sangha. No second chances. The takeaway here is that the Sangha was a serious, highly disciplined organization. All right, now we're getting into the really complex stuff. This is where UPSC loves to set its traps. After the Buddha passed away, disagreements started to pop up. To sort them out, councils were held. But eventually, these disagreements led to major splits in the religion. Think of this timeline as your guide through the chaos. The first council happened right after the Buddha's death, and its job was to write down his teachings. The second council, about 100 years later, is where we see the first real crack appear. The Third Council, under the great Emperor Ashoka, added the more philosophical texts. And finally, the Fourth Council is where the big split into Hinayana and Mahayana becomes official. Now get this, because it's a classic UPSC point of confusion. The very first major split in Buddhism wasn't about some deep, complex philosophy. It was about the rulebook for monks. On one side, you had the Theravada, the elders. They were the orthodox minority who wanted to make the rules even stricter. On the other side was the Mahasanghika, the great community. They were the majority, and they said, nope, let's stick to the original rules. This seemingly minor tiff over discipline was the seed for everything that came later. And you can see how those early attitudes grew into two very different ways of thinking. The Theravada tradition, the rule followers, eventually led to what we call Hinayana. Their goal was personal salvation, achieving nirvana for oneself. The more liberal Mahasanghika tradition, on the other hand, evolved into Mahayana. Their goals shifted to something bigger, becoming a bodhisattva to help all beings achieve enlightenment. Hinayana is about saving yourself. Mahayana is about saving everyone. That's the core difference. That incredible idea of saving everyone leads us directly to the concept of the Bodhisattva, which is really the heart and soul of Mahayana Buddhism. So let's unpack that and also quickly look at the foundational texts of the faith. So what on earth is a Bodhisattva? I mean, think about it. It's someone who has done all the hard work. They're standing at the doorway to nirvana, ready to end all their suffering forever. But out of sheer compassion, they turn back from that door and say, no, I'm staying here until every other single being is saved first. It's an incredible concept. And here's the who's who of the most famous bodhisattvas. You've got Maitreya, who is the Buddha yet to come. There's Avalokiteshvara, the absolute embodiment of compassion, often shown with a lotus. Then there's Manjushri, with his sword that cuts through ignorance. And Vajrapani, who represents the strength needed to stay on the path. Knowing these figures and their symbols is super helpful, especially for art and culture questions. And finally, the texts. The entire early Buddhist canon is known as the Tripitaka, which literally means the three baskets. Simple, right? The Sutta Pitaka is the basket of the Buddha's own words and sermons. The Vinaya Pitaka is the basket of rules for the Sangha we talked about. And the Abhidhamma Pitaka is the basket containing deep philosophical breakdowns of the teachings. And if you want one quote to sum up the entire spirit of early Buddhism, it's this one. The Buddha always insisted that it wasn't about worshiping him as a person. It was about understanding the Dharma, the teaching, the truth. If you understand the teaching, you have seen the Buddha. The message was always greater than the man. So, let's circle back to where we started and really test that conceptual clarity. Based on everything we've just discussed, can you now clearly explain the difference between a future Buddha, like Maitreya, and the general concept of a bodhisattva? Think it through. The answer isn't just a definition. It's about understanding the nuance between a specific destiny and a universal path. Nailing that difference? Well, that's what turns a good attempt into a great score.